Hey guys, tonight we sail into something a little softer, a little squawkier, and, believe it or not, a lot more complicated than it first appears. You're aboard a creaking pirate brig, the wood under your boots warm from the sun, the sails puffing softly above you, and a sea that rolls like a giant's slow breathing. On the quarterdeck stands a captain, hands clasped behind his back, and on his shoulder, a parrot, bright, green, and glaring at you like it already knows your secret. You might be thinking, ah yes, the cliché, pirates and parrots. Maybe you've seen it in movies, on cereal boxes, or Halloween costumes. But tonight, we're unraveling the squawking, molting truth. It's louder, funnier, and way more feathered than the legends let on. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know where you're listening from, and what time it is where you are. Always fun to see who else is drifting off with us. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You smell salt, tar, and something suspiciously fruity. Maybe it's grog. Maybe it's that half-eaten mango lodged in a coil of rope. Either way, this ship is alive, wood groaning, ropes snapping in rhythm, and there, cutting through it all, is the rasp of a parrot. Not a gentle chirp, not a melodic whistle. No, this is a full-throated squawk, and it's coming from a red-lord Amazon perched regally on the captain's shoulder. You flinch. The bird stares. You quickly learn this parrot has opinions, loud ones. It screeches when sails go up. It shrieks at new recruit. It flaps menacingly when someone touches the rum ration. And yet, no one dares mess with it. The first mate says it once bit a man for snoring. Another sailor insists it mimicked the captain's laugh so perfectly, it caused a mutiny scare. What's this bird doing here anyway? Well, back then, parrots weren't decorations. They weren't just sidekicks for lonely pirates. Although, spoiler, loneliness will come into play later. Parrots were status. If you had a parrot, you weren't just a sea-hardened rogue. You were a sea-hardened rogue with taste. Tropical birds were rare back in Europe. The ones that could talk? Even rarer. And in some ports, more valuable than stolen silver. You don't know this yet, but you're sailing with a crew that includes 2 parrots, a suspiciously silent monkey, and a goat named Delilah who eats boot. The goat, strangely enough, gets seasick. The parrots don't. The captain's bird? He calls her Maria. Historians still argue whether she was the same Maria he once courted in Havana, but we'll get to that later. For now, Maria is preening her feathers and eyeing your hat. That hat will not survive. A sudden gust fills the sails and Maria lets out a deafening wind. You jump. The crew doesn't. They barely react. You realize the parrot knows more about this ship than you do. And this isn't unusual. Many pirates, especially those sailing through the Caribbean and along the African coast, adopted parrots not out of fashion, but out of function. These birds were smart. Alarm systems, early warning, company, and yes, entertainment. There's a record, written long after the golden age of piracy, of a parrot that once warned its crew of approaching British patrols. "White coat!" it supposedly yelled from the rigging, just loud enough to alert everyone without waking the sleeping captain. Did it really happen? Maybe. Maybe not. But it paints a vivid picture. Now you're walking below deck. It's darker here, smells like fish oil and damp wood, and yet you hear a familiar flutter. Another parrot, smaller, less aggressive. It blinks at you, then coos something that sounds like, "Where's your sock?" Which is weird. Because you are, in fact, missing a sock. You laugh softly. Then you stop yourself. Did the parrot just laugh back? You're not sure if you should be alarmed or impressed. And as you make your way through the dim corridors of the ship, you realize these birds aren't background noise. They're part of the daily rhythm. like the groan of the planks or the slap of waves. You don't understand the whole story yet, but something in your bones tells you it's weirder, sadder, and funnier than anyone warned you. And so begins your voyage with parrots, not just as mascots or memes, but as winged companions with more history than you might expect. You settle onto a creaky bench near the galley. Overhead, Maria lets out a sharp whistle, then mutters a phrase that sounds suspiciously like, "Nice boots." You sigh. That bird is definitely mocking you. You wake to the sound of rustling leaves, not from the ship this time, but from the thick, humid jungle that spills down to the shore. You're not on the open sea right now. You've anchored near one of the many islands peppered across the Caribbean, the kind that barely shows up on any map, save for a scribbled note like "fresh water here" or "beware goats." And here's the thing, you're not here for treasure. You're here for parrots. It turns out your captain's growing fondness for feathered crew members has turned into a sort of obsession. He insists every proper ship should have at least one parrot per mast, which, given the number of masts, means you and 3 other unlucky souls are now trudging through mosquito-thick air with a net, a crate, and a half-rotten banana. The banana's for bait. In theory, the forest pulses with color. Green so intense they look painted. The sky above is slashed with vines, and somewhere, a howler monkey is telling you in no uncertain terms to turn back. You don't. Then you hear it, a squawk. Not the kind your captain's Maria makes. This is sharper, higher, and, if possible, even more judgmental. You push through the brush and spot your quarry, a pair of red and green macaws, perched like arrogant royalty on a crooked branch. They stare at you with what feels like withering disdain. You're sweating through your shirt. They are pristine. The Caribbean islands were teeming with parrots back in the Golden Age. From Cuba to Dominica, from the Yucatan to Trinidad, the forests echoed with calls. British, French, Dutch, and Spanish colonists marveled at the number and noise. Pirates, who often spent time ashore restocking water and misbehaving, started picking them up too. Some birds were tamed by locals and traded. Others were trapped by the crew themselves, usually with clumsy methods and mixed result. You try the banana trick. The macaw doesn't care. Frustrated, one of your shipmates tries flapping his arms like a bird. You all agree never to speak of this again. Eventually, your group stumbles upon a more practical scene, a clearing with cages. Locals, who've seen your kind before, have already caught several parrots, mostly Amazons and Kanas. You strike a trade. Salted fish, some beads, and a small dagger. You get 2 birds in return. Both look offended. One nips your glove. You name him Spite. Historians still argue whether these tropical birds were captured primarily for trade or for companionship, while pirates certainly enjoyed selling them, especially in northern colonies where parrots fetched absurd prices. There's no denying that many grew attached. Birds were intelligent, mimicked speech, and responded to tone and affection. Some captains treated them better than crew. You think back to Maria, back on the ship. Her cage is carved wood and brass. She eats fruit slices with more variety than the cook serves the men. When a sailor complained about the bird getting a bigger portion than him, the captain offered to swap their jobs. The sailor declined. But not every bird was pampered. You remember passing a Spanish sloop once, its parrot tied to the rigging with a rough hemp rope, feathers plucked nearly bald. It had learned only one phrase, "No, no, no." You tried not to read into that. As your party returns to the beach, carrying squirming crates and squawking bundles, you spot the longboats waiting to ferry you back. One of the new birds mutters something in what sounds like French. You're not sure if it's a curse or just an accidental accent. By the time you reach the ship, the deck is crowded. A few crew members clap as the new parrots arrive, as if welcoming old friends. Others groan. You hear someone mutter, "Great. More feathers in my porridge." It's true, parrot care aboard a ship is complicated. Feeding them was easier on land, when you had fruit, nuts, and the occasional unlucky insect. But at sea, they picked at biscuits, nibbled salted meat, somewhat reluctantly, and stole whatever wasn't nailed down. One notorious parrot on a Dutch privateer became addicted to molasses and would shriek until someone gave it a spoonful. It also, reportedly, used its beak to open rum bottles. You glance at Spite. He's already chewing through the edge of the water barrel. Parrots were also loud. Incredibly loud. The inside of a wooden ship is like a drum, amplifying every squeak, scratch, and scream. Add a flock of parrots and you get chaos. Yet somehow, amidst the shouting and stomping, their noise became part of the background. Like creaking planks, or seasick groans. You lie in your hammock that night, rocking gently with the ship, the stars like powdered sugar over the dark sea. One of the new parrots hoots from the bow. Another whistles a broken tune. Then, Maria mutters from her perch near the helm, "Bad wind, bad wind." You freeze. The crew freezes. The wind does change. A minute later, clouds blot the stars. A storm is coming. Coincidence? Maybe. Or maybe Maria has a better sense for weather than any man aboard. Historians still argue whether parrots could sense barometric pressure shifts, or just picked up on the crew's shifting tones. Either way, you adjust your hammock, pull your coat over your chest, and listen to the birds mutter, whistle, and softly judge you. The morning after the storm, the ship smells like soaked rope and regret. Sails are limp, barrels have rolled out of place, and half the crew is grumbling while wringing out their socks over the side. Your boots squelch with every step. Someone's lost a spoon. Someone else, apparently, lost a parrot. But not Maria. She's fine. Preening herself like royalty, feathers only mildly windblown. Spite, however, looks like he's been through 3 arguments and a minor existential crisis. You relate. Once the ship steadies, the captain calls for inspection, and this is when you notice something curious. The birds. They're being counted, checked, even weighed, as if they're cargo, which, it turns out, they are. Back then, parrots weren't just pets. They were part of a pirate's economy. Some birds fetched more than silverware. In certain colonial ports, a talking parrot could go for the equivalent of half a year's wages. Europeans loved them. French aristocrats would pay obscene sums for exotic creatures. Parrots were fashionable, absurd, and, most importantly, entertaining. You recall a story the boatswain told one night over dice. A parrot sold in Port Royal in 1690 that could sing the first 5 notes of Greensleeves. The buyer fainted from delight. Or possibly rum. Either way, the parrot was later stolen, prompting what may have been the first ever bird-based bounty hunt. Historians still debate the exact details, but the idea lingers. Parrots as high-value smuggled goods. You walk the deck, watching as the quartermaster logs each bird into the ship's manifest, by color, size, and mood. One is marked as green, medium, furious. Another, yellow, quiet, possibly judgmental. The birds aren't just inventory. They're leverage. A Spanish galleon might be tricked into trade negotiations if a pirate ship offered live tropical goods. A few feathered creatures, well placed in cages, could distract customs officers while smugglers slipped rum ashore. In some cases, parrots were exchanged directly for items like spices, clothing, or ammunition. And then there's the barter game. You overhear a quiet conversation between the cook and a newly promoted gunner. They're negotiating over a parrot with orange tail feathers. The price? 3 tins of tobacco and a promise not to wake each other during storm watch. In the background, Spite chews a knot out of a sailor's belt. No one stops him. Some captains encouraged this behavior. Parrots as commodities, little investments on the perch. Others, like yours, saw them as symbolic. a colorful contrast to the grim business of plunder. A splash of chaotic joy in a world of musket smoke and salted meat. You pause near the helm and stare at the old map pinned to the rail. There's a corner smudged with what looks like ink. You look closer. It's not ink. It's parrot droppings. Maria again. Someone groans. That's the third time this week. You chuckle, but it reminds you parrots interfered. With navigation. With bookkeeping. With morale. One famous account tells of a bird that shrieked every time the captain plotted a course toward Havana. The crew grew superstitious. The captain grew angry. The parrot mysteriously vanished. The ship sank in shallow waters 3 days later. Coincidence? Maybe. Or maybe the bird knew something. In your pocket, you still carry a scrap of fruit from the jungle. Spite eyes it like he knows it belongs to him. You toss it over. He misses. It hits the quartermaster. Another entry gets scratched angrily into the manifest. Green, also inaccurate. Later, you visit the hold, where a few of the birds not favored by the crew are kept in makeshift cages. It's quieter down here, the wooden walls thick, the air heavy with tar and citrus. One parrot hums. Another rocks slowly, repeating the word pear, as if auditioning for a role it doesn't quite understand. You sit for a while. You think about how strange it is, this intersection of piracy and trade, of loud, feathered things becoming part of the quiet, calculated world of commerce, of how even creatures meant to fly became tangled in human economies. Spite lands near your boot, squawks, and then attempts to steal a loose string. It's oddly comforting, and as the ship rocks gently, the sails billowing with lazy rhythm, you close your eyes for a moment and imagine the bird markets of Port Royal or Tortuga. The noise, the smells, parrots in cages next to monkeys, next to pineapples, next to guns. A blur of bright colors and bartering hands. Somewhere in the blur, you see Maria, in a faraway future, sitting on a polished perch inside some wealthy European drawing room. Her eyes still sharp. Her voice still echoing with the sea. You're jolted awake by a single, shrill cry. Man overboard! You leap up, heart pounding, only to find the deck perfectly calm, the sun glinting off quiet waters, and the crew going about their business. No splashes, no panic, no flailing limbs. Just Maria. She's perched near the mast, head tilted smugly, as if daring someone to question her. A few crew members chuckle. One claps sarcastically. Another mutters, "She's just messing with us now." You slump against the rail. This is your third false alarm this week. You're learning that pirate parrots were rarely just ornamental, they had jobs. Or at least, they acted like they did. And while the bird hollering "man overboard" may not have been part of the ship's formal chain of command, she was watched, listened to, and, strangely, obeyed. Some parrots were trained as unofficial lookouts, especially the more vocal species like African greys or yellow-naped Amazons. Their mimicry wasn't limited to human speech. They could mimic the cry of a hawk, the creak of sails under strain, or the pop of a musket being primed. Sometimes they even learned to imitate the groans of the hull before a storm, a detail which, if true, would be both useful and terrifying. Historians still argue whether parrots actively helped during naval engagements. There's one dubious record from a Dutch privateer's log, claiming a parrot on board shouted "Fire!" seconds before a cannon broadside, startling the enemy into misfiring. Was it trained? Coincidence? Or simply yelling what it heard every day? Still, it paints a vivid picture. Birds not just surviving pirate life, but participating in it. You're watching Maria now, observing her as she watches the ship. Her eyes dart constantly, following movement like a seasoned quartermaster. A sailor climbs into the rigging and she squawks, "Up, up," which somehow feels like encouragement and judgment rolled into one. Beside her, Spite is gnawing on a pulley rope. Less useful, more chaotic. But not every parrot was a performer. Some were, frankly, freeloaders. The crew had mixed feelings. One bird named Jeffrey, aboard a Bahamian sloop, reportedly shouted the word "No" at any order given on deck. It confused new recruits and annoyed officers. Eventually, Jeffrey was reassigned, literally, to the captain's quarters as a morale advisor. That, you realize, is the key role of many pirate parrots: morale. Amid months of hardtack and salt pork, rough storms, and even rougher tempers, a bird shouting nonsense or whistling a tavern song could break the monotony. Or the tension. One sailor tells you that during a week-long becalming off the Yucatan, it was only the crew's parrot, who had learned to mimic a bawdy limerick in 5 accents, that kept the crew from stabbing each other with forks. You don't even want to know how it learned 5 accents. And you can't help but wonder, did parrots pick sides in crew disputes? Did they echo their favorite humans? Reinforce alliances by shrieking someone's nickname at just the right moment? Some say yes. Others claim the birds were neutral chaos. Either way, their voices shaped the mood of the ship. For better or occasionally worse. Take the case of an English brigantine that sailed with a parrot named Finch. Finch had picked up the phrase, "He's got the map," and repeated it constantly. The problem? No one had the map. Not really. But Finch kept saying it, and eventually the crew suspected each other, searched each other's belongings, and sparked a minor mutiny. The parrot was not invited back for the next voyage. You look at Spite. He's trying to remove a sailor's earring. You admire the focus. As midday sun turns the deck into a slow roast, the crew falls into rhythm. Ropes are coiled, sails adjusted. And, of course, the parrots scream at entirely random intervals. Maria mimics a bell. Another parrot starts yelling, "Soup's on," despite there being no soup. You glance over to the cook, who is now swearing softly into a bucket of onions. The absurdity of it all is weirdly comforting. Life aboard a pirate ship is unpredictable, dangerous, sometimes bloody. But the parrots? They add a layer of absurd humor that somehow makes the danger feel less immediate. A cannon misfires and a bird yells, "Oopsie!" and suddenly you're laughing instead of panicking. That, perhaps, is the true brilliance of these birds. They weren't just lookouts or mascots or mobile loot. They were mood setters. Scream-powered therapy. A burst of nonsense to break the cycle of fear and fatigue. By late afternoon, the captain strolls across the deck, Maria perched in full pomp on his shoulder. She trills a soft note, musical this time, almost tender. He reaches up to scratch her head. She allows it. You realize something else then. Some of these birds weren't just taught. They taught back. They mirrored not just words but moods, tones, reactions. Maria has lived through storms, skirmishes, and at least one regrettable rationing incident. She's learned more than most of the crew. And maybe, just maybe, that means she's more than cargo, more than a pet, more than a novelty. She's a witness. Spite sneezes. Well, maybe not every parrot. You're trying to eat breakfast. It's a simple affair, hardtack that breaks like pottery, and a questionable smear of something the cook calls jam. The crew is mostly silent, chewing with effort and keeping their expectations low. Then a parrot screams, "Foul biscuits!" Every head turns. You're not sure which bird it is, possibly the green one named Mulberry, who lives near the foremast and has a talent for perfectly timed slander. Or maybe it's a new arrival, already learning the art of pirate sarcasm. Either way, someone snorts tea through their nose. The captain doesn't even look up. This is daily life with parrots. They don't just scream for fun, though, to be fair, they do plenty of that too. They become integrated into routines. You start noticing how they sync with ship life. They nap when the crew naps. They wake up loudly, about 10 minutes before everyone else wants to. They develop preferences. 4 hammocks, 4 voices for who they'll allow near their perches. You learn that Maria hates sneezes. Anyone sneezing near her gets a shrieked, "Get out!" That feels deeply personal. You also learn that Spite prefers the sound of knives being sharpened. Not for any useful reason. He just starts bobbing his head every time it happens, like a tiny, feathery blacksmith. Down below, in the sleeping quarters, a parrot named Fig regularly perches above the hammocks and says, "Good night," in a tone that's somehow both soothing and threatening. This is where you start to understand. The parrots live pirate life. They don't just survive it. From deck to galley to sleeping hold, they carve out their roles. Some are clowns. Some are guards. Some are clearly trying to become officers. One parrot near the cook station insists on repeating orders. Loudly. Incorrectly. "More salt," it yelled once, and everyone had a very bad stew that night. You're cleaning gear near the bow when you see something odd. Maria pecking at a game of dice. Not to play, of course. She's trying to scatter the pieces. Apparently, she hates gambling. Or maybe just hates losing. Historically, parrots aboard pirate ships weren't just tolerated, they were, at times, revered. There's a letter, likely exaggerated, from a Spanish merchant who claimed he watched pirates interrupt a fight over stolen coin because the ship's parrot looked displeased. Whether this was genuine reverence or superstition isn't clear. Historians still argue whether some parrots were treated as omens, particularly those that spoke at odd moments or responded to names not said aloud. You overhear one sailor whisper, "If Maria speaks your name while you're sleeping, you won't see morning." You laugh. Then remember she has said your name. Twice. You laugh less. In truth, pirate life was hard, dirty, boring, then suddenly terrifying. Anything that broke the tension or became a small anchor of normalcy was welcomed, especially if it didn't demand rum or pay. Parrots were that. Portable chaos. Unexpected warmth. You hear a commotion on the quarterdeck and rush up. Spite has stolen someone's spoon. Again. A chase begins. It lasts 5 minutes. Ends with a sailor dangling upside down and Spite sitting smugly on the wheel. He drops the spoon. Perfect aim. Right into the brig. Somewhere, a parrot shrieks, he's in jail. Dinner that night is unusually cheerful. Even the captain seems lighter, laughing when Maria says, "Terrible soup," just as he raises his spoon. No one corrects her. She's not wrong. Later, when the sun slides down in the west, painting the sails gold and pink, you notice something else. The birds start quieting. They tuck beaks under wings. Their feathers ruffle into softer shape. The ship falls into a different rhythm, gentler, slower, like the ocean's lullaby. You sit on a coil of rope, back against a warm rail, eyes following the fading horizon. Nearby, a young sailor softly hums. One of the parrots, might be Fig again, whistles along. Not quite in tune, not quite out. Just close enough. You realize you're getting used to this. To the feathers in your boot. The occasional bite on your wrist. The unsolicited commentary on your laundry habit. It's all part of life now. Parrots have slipped into the bones of the ship. Not everyone adjusts. There's a grizzled old gunner who keeps trying to chase birds off with his hat. They always return. Sometimes to the same perch. Sometimes to his hat. He says he once had a parrot that told him when his brother died. No one's sure if he means metaphorically, magically, or just suspicious timing. No one asked. You lie back, watching sails ripple like breath. Somewhere behind you, Maria says softly, "Good night, stinker." You smile. Because somehow that feels affectionate. You're jolted awake. Not by cannon fire or the dreaded cry of pirates off the port bow, but by the soul-piercing sound of a parrot doing its best impression of a man being murdered. Wahuf. You roll out of your hammock, smack your head on a beam, and stagger onto the deck, heart pounding. There is no blood. There is no battle. There is only Maria, sitting calmly on the helm, preening her feathers like she didn't just shatter your spirit. The captain strolls past, nods casually, and mutters, "She's testing a new vocal range." Another crewman chuckles, "That's her storm shriek." You want to cry. This, you now understand, is what passes for an alarm system on this ship. Forget polished brass bells or rotating watches with coordinated hand signals. Here, you've got feathered banshees. At any given hour, at least one parrot is squawking something urgent sounding. And half the time, they're absolutely right. The other half? They're announcing the arrival of a sandwich. "Storm coming," one cries. "It's not." "Man in the water," another shrieks. "That was just old Jeb throwing a bucket overboard." Still, it's not all bluster. Some of these birds have surprising instincts. There's one yellow-crowned parrot named Clementine who starts flapping frantically anytime the pressure drops. And she's never wrong. The last 3 squalls? She screamed herself hoarse 20 minutes before the clouds even formed. Historians still argue whether parrots had an actual sensitivity to barometric pressure, or if they simply picked up on the body language and murmurs of anxious crew. Maybe a little of both. One fringe theory, popular with particularly salty old sailors, insists some birds could smell thunder. You don't buy that. But watching Maria suddenly fluff her feathers and mutter, "Uh-oh," as the sky darkens makes you think twice. And they definitely respond to mood. The night before your last skirmish, every bird went quiet. Not silent. Just still. Watchful. Spite stopped chewing. Maria stopped mocking. Even Mulberry, who usually could not comment on the state of everyone's hair, turned his head to the east and whispered, "No go." Nobody laughed. It's unsettling, realizing how deeply these birds have embedded themselves into the rhythm of things. They're not just pets or passengers. They're early warning systems, mood barometers, feathered echoes of the crew's collective subconscious. Of course, this also means they can drive you slowly insane. Clementine has taken to repeating, "Run," in increasingly urgent tones. She does this every few hours. No one knows why. You tried asking. She whistled Yankee Doodle and bit your sleeve. During one watch, you swear Spite yells, "Fire!" just to make you spill your tea. He stares directly into your soul while doing it. Some captains, less patient than yours, actually banned birds entirely from their ship. There are records of a Portuguese slaver that tossed 2 macaws overboard because they wouldn't stop repeating, "Turn around," every time the ship altered course. Creepy, yes, but also expensive. Those birds could have paid for half the rum supply. The noise, the chaos, the unpredictability, it was all part of the deal. But you're starting to notice how the crew relies on it. Subconsciously. Everyone listens. Even if they roll their eyes, even if they mutter curses, even if they blame the birds for lost sleep or headaches, they're always listening. A shout from a parrot often gets faster results than a real officer's command. One morning Maria squawks, "Loose rope," and 3 crewmen drop their cards and bolt for the lines. She was right. One sail was half a second from unfurling into disaster. The captain just nodded. Good bird. There's no ceremony, no reward, just acknowledgement. And somehow that seems enough. You think about the parrots who probably died in battle, birds on doomed ships, creatures that screamed and flailed and maybe called for help in 5 languages while everything around them burned. It's a sad thought. But then, so is pirate life. Maybe that's why the birds scream. Or maybe they're just loud because they can be. Because someone has to fill the silence between thunder and cannon fire. Later that night, you're back in your hammock, rocking gently. The storm hasn't hit yet, but the sky is grumbling. You hear a distant whistle. Then, from the mainmast, "Tighten sail." You smile. It's Maria again. The sails are already tight, but no one argues. You hear footsteps. The crew is adjusting lines, moving cargo, preparing like they always do. Not because someone told them to, but because the bird reminded them. You fall asleep to a chorus of soft whistles, the creak of wood, and Maria muttering, "Big boom coming." She's probably right. You wake just after dawn, eyelids sticky, dreams full of fluttering feathers and salty wind. Above you, the usual cacophony is already underway: squawks, curses, laughter, and the dull clank of breakfast being slopped into bowls. You stretch, knock your head again, this beam will be the end of you, and clamber up onto the deck just in time to witness one of the more unique daily routines aboard this particular pirate vessel. It's bath time. Not for the crew. Oh no. They're years past help. It's parrot bath time. There, amid ropes and barrels and barely conscious men sipping grog, is a bucket. And inside that bucket, Spite, flapping and shrieking with the raw joy of a creature who understands the value of good hygiene better than most of the crew combined. He dunks his head, fluffs dramatically, then launches into a dripping, shaking pirouette that soaks 3 men nearby. No one complains. One of them even mutters, "That's the cleanest I've been all month." This, you've come to realize, is part of the dance. Pirates and parrots, locked in a daily exchange of favors and rituals. Food gets shared. Feathers get ruffled. Someone sings. Someone bites. It's all very choreographed chaos. You notice the cook now sets aside extra hardtack not for the crew, but for the birds. Not because he's generous, because the birds will not shut up until they get theirs. It's an unspoken rule. Feed the birds first or regret it for the next 6 hours. And here's the thing, parrots don't just eat. They judge. Give them stale fruit, they'll throw it at you. Try to skip their portion, and they'll scream your name for the rest of the day in a voice that sounds suspiciously like your mother's. Some birds even seem to prefer dining with certain crew members. Maria insists on perching near the captain every morning. If someone else tries to offer her a treat, she delicately turns her head, then drops the treat overboard without breaking eye contact. Absolute diva behavior. But the crew has adapted. They leave extra room at the mess table. They tie up hammocks so low that certain birds can hop in for a cuddle if they feel like it. You've seen men literally pause a fistfight mid-punch because a parrot landed on one of their shoulders. There's respect. Or at least self-preservation. And it goes both ways. Parrots, for all their flair, are surprisingly observant. They remember routines, detect changes in rhythm, and somehow always know when someone's about to try something stupid. Like last week, when Scraps tried to sneak extra rum from the stores. Before he even touched the barrel, Mulberry screamed, "Thief! Thief! Bad idea!" Half the crew came running. Poor Scraps never stood a chance. Historians still argue whether these routines, feeding, bathing, perching, shouting, created a sort of behavioral feedback loop between pirate and parrot. Were the birds imitating the pirates, or were the pirates slowly bending to parrot logic? Some even suggest certain parrots acted like miniature quartermasters, remembering who got what, who was due a ration, and who skipped out on chores. That might be a stretch, but then again, Clementine did bite the hand of the guy who always forgot his share of the night watch. Coincidence? You're starting to doubt it. One of your favorites is a green-feathered Amazon named Beppo. Every evening at sunset, Beppo does laps around the deck, shouting, "Turn iron! Turn iron!" like some squawking bugler. No one told him to. He just started doing it. And now? It's routine. The sun dips low, Beppo shouts, and hammocks start swinging within minutes. And let's not forget the grooming rituals. Parrots demand attention. You've spent hours watching Maria pick through the captain's hair like she's inspecting treasure. When she finds a speck of something you don't want to know, she tosses it disdainfully overboard. Crew members often pluck loose feathers and tuck them behind ears, in hatbands, or under belt. For luck. For decoration. Sometimes, just because it makes them feel a little less grimy. It's a strange kind of camaraderie. Birds groom pirates. Pirates groom birds. Everyone's slightly filthy, but somehow it's all balanced. You once saw a man painstakingly untangle a knot in Spite's tail feathers while simultaneously swearing vengeance on another sailor. The dichotomy was stunning. There's an order to the madness. A rhythm. Maybe that's what keeps you sane. When you're not steering into hurricanes or dodging naval patrols, it's these tiny rituals that make you feel human. Or at least, less like a soggy piece of driftwood. You sit now beside a barrel, chewing a bit of tough bread. Spite hops onto your shoulder, steals a bite, then makes a sound that suspiciously resembles a burp. He nuzzles your ear. You roll your eyes, but you're smiling. Somewhere behind you, Maria belts out, "Rum time." She's early. It's not even noon. But half the crew moves anyway, groaning as they shuffle toward the hold. You swear she's training them. Eventually, someone's going to make her captain. Honestly, you'd be okay with it. By now, you've given up pretending you're not fully invested in the daily parrot drama. You wake each morning not to the sun, nor the sound of waves lapping against the hull, but to Spite reciting, in perfect pitch, the exact phrase the quartermaster shouted when he slipped in the bilge last week. It's vulgar. It's unprintable. It's alarmingly accurate. You laugh anyway. It's become part of the charm. Today, as you rub sleep from your eyes and peer across the deck, something unusual catches your attention. There's a standoff happening. Two parrots. One slice of pineapple. On the left, Maria, feathers fluffed, head tilted, exuding smug entitlement. On the right, a scrappy newcomer named Goblin, bright red, unreasonably loud, and criminally fast. The crew has gathered around, hushed, as though watching a duel. No one dares interfere. Then, in a blink, Goblin snatches the pineapple and flutters onto a mast rope, triumphantly squawking what sounds suspiciously like "loser" as Maria glares murderously. That's going to have consequences. Welcome to the chaotic and surprisingly nuanced world of parrot hierarchies aboard pirate ship. While no one officially ranked these birds, it's clear they had pecking orders, literally and socially. Some were favorite, some were outcast, some were plotting something. Historians still argue whether parrots genuinely formed social hierarchies among themselves, or if the pirates simply projected their own systems of rank onto the birds. After all, when every man aboard has a different idea of authority, it's oddly comforting to believe a green-feathered creature with a curved beak understands order. You start noticing the patterns. Maria never shares a perch. Ever. If another bird comes too close, she sidesteps just enough to make them lose balance and fall off. Then she preens innocently. Beppo, on the other hand, insists on singing with others. He'll hop next to Goblin, whistle an off-key version of a sea shanty, and nudge him until he joins in. Some parrots are solitary. Others thrive in pairs. And a few, like Spite, are just plain chaotic, flitting between groups, starting trouble, then pretending they had nothing to do with it. It's eerily similar to the crew. The captain has favorites, of course. Maria rides on his shoulder so often that his coat is permanently stained in a pattern shaped exactly like two parrot feet. She's the queen, untouchable, but even she isn't above vengeance. Last month, one of the crew tossed a bucket of seawater too close to her. Not at her, mind you, just near enough to dampen her tail feathers. For the next 5 days, Maria woke that man up at precisely 3 a.m. with a blood-curdling scream. Every single night. Eventually, he apologized, with fruit. She forgave him. Probably. You wonder if parrots remember slights more than kindnesses. Historians point to countless anecdotes. birds recognizing old enemies, responding with aggression, even mimicking angry phrases weeks after hearing them only once. It makes sense. Parrots are long-lived. Some species outlive the pirates who kept them. A grudge held by a parrot could last decades. There's an old superstition among the crew. If a parrot screams during negotiations, the deal's doomed. If it coos or whistles, you're golden. Of course, that could just mean the bird saw a bug. But still, nobody risks it. You once watched the captain delay a trade by half a day because Beppo kept muttering, "No good, no good," every time the other ship came close. Coincidence? Perhaps. Or maybe parrots simply pick up on moods, on body language, tension, the way voices rise and fall. It's easy to laugh when Goblin shouts, "Oh," during a storm, but part of you still clutches the railing a little tighter. It's not just the crew that respects these unspoken parrot rank. The birds themselves seem acutely aware of who can get away with what. Maria can steal food from anyone. No one retaliates. Goblin? He tries that, and he's pecked into a pile of shame feathers within seconds. Even Spite knows better than to sit on Maria's perch. He hovers, huffs, but doesn't dare land. There was one notable exception, a parrot named Duchess. Not flashy, not loud, but unsettlingly quiet. She never squawked, just stared. And for reasons no one fully understood, every other parrot gave her space. Lots of it. One night, she flew across the deck and landed square on Maria's perch. Maria flinched and moved. No fuss, no screeching, just quiet concession. You asked around. No one could explain it. Some say Duchess had belonged to a notorious Caribbean smuggler. Others claim she witnessed something unspeakable and carried the ghost of it in her eyes. You just think she had vibes. Pirates may not have followed naval code, but they respected power. So did their birds. So here you are, seated beside the galley door, sipping warm water from a tin cup, watching Goblin try to rejoin the flock after the pineapple incident. Maria gives him a cold glance. He stays 5 feet away. Beppo flaps in, chirps something obscene, and everyone forgets what they were mad about. The ship rocks gently. The sun glints off the sails. Somewhere overhead, Duchess watches it all. You're beginning to realize this is less a ship and more a floating parrot kingdom with a few humans allowed on board. You're okay with that. The days pass in a sort of parrot-patterned rhythm now. You know who squawks when. You know when to duck because Goblin's probably going to attempt flight with a full cracker in his beak again. You know Maria will try to steal your button, again, and Spite will whisper forbidden phrases into your dreams from his perch, right when you're almost asleep. But today things shift. You're swabbing the deck, yes, you drew the short straw, and your eyes land on something odd hanging from a nail just outside the captain's quarters. A tiny stitched coat. Feather-sized. Brightly dyed. You blink. Maybe you didn't sleep well. But then the captain steps out and holds up the garment like he's about to present it at a Parisian fashion show. And who should land on his shoulder but Beppo, now draped in a miniature blue waistcoat, complete with tiny brass buttons. Beppo preens. He knows he looks good. Turns out, pirate parrots sometimes wore costumes. Not always. Not everywhere. But enough that it became a talking point in journals, paintings, and rumor-laced tavern tales. There were birds in silk pantaloons, birds with eye patches, birds with hats, most of which they immediately threw overboard, but still. Historians still argue whether these outfits were functional, symbolic, or just absurd indulgences of bored sailors with too much spare cloth. Some believe parrots were dressed to make them more recognizable in port, so they wouldn't be mistaken for wild birds. Others argue it was purely for amusement, a way for pirates to create little avatars of themselves. There's a theory, half serious, half wink, that the more elaborately dressed a parrot, the higher status its owner claimed aboard the ship. You're starting to believe it. Beppo's coat is lined with green trim, clearly made from scraps of someone's vest. Maria, not to be outdone, soon sports a delicate anklet of shells. Goblin ends up with what looks like a napkin cape tied to his back, which he wears like he's ready to leap off the crow's nest and rescue the rum. You suspect this trend may get out of hand, and it does. Within the week, there's a full-on parrot fashion show. No, seriously. The crew lines the deck cheering. Someone's drawn a runway in chalk. Parrots are released one by one with dramatic flair. Spite struts in a sash made from someone's old sock. Duchess? No one dares dress her, but she appears anyway, perching regally at the helm, as if silently judging everyone. You're laughing so hard your sides hurt. Of course, this turns into bets. Pirates bet on everything, and today is no different. Wagers fly over which bird walks the straightest, flaps the fanciest, or poops mid-strut. Spoiler. Goblin wins that last category. It's chaos. Beautiful, nonsensical chaos. But there's something deeper going on beneath the feathered fun. You overhear one pirate, old, mostly toothless, muttering, "Never thought I'd laugh again, not after the storm took half the crew." And just like that, you get it. These birds aren't just pets. They're not even just mascots. They're morale. They remind hardened men that joy still exists, that silliness has a place even when cannonballs might fly tomorrow. Dressing a parrot in a velvet glove-turned vest isn't just absurd, it's hopeful. You help craft a feathered crown for a particularly tiny parrot named Niblet. It's made of string, gold foil, and one suspiciously fancy button. Niblet wears it like he's always ruled this ship. A week later, the crew paints a tiny throne onto a crate and dubs him Lord Niblet. Someone carves a peanut emblem into it. He accepts the honor with a shrill sneeze and promptly falls asleep. And you think, maybe this is what keeps a pirate crew together. Not just gold or grog or shared hatred of imperial navies, but the absurd, collective agreement that yes, today we will host a parrot pageant, and yes, Niblet deserves to be royalty. There's a kind of sanity in shared silliness. It holds fast where discipline breaks down. It gives the crew something to root for that isn't soaked in violence. Eventually, even the captain joins in. You catch him humming a lullaby as he stitches a tiny cape. He denies it, of course, but you saw. A week later, Beppo appears with a new accessory, a leather scabbard carrying a pretend sword carved from driftwood. He waddles across the deck with gravitas, clearly convinced he's now a parrot knight. You start to imagine a whole world of parrot nobility. Duels over sunflower seeds, parrot diplomacy, treaties negotiated in chirp. It's ridiculous. And yet, as you lie back on the deck at sunset, Maria perched on the railing beside you in her pearl tassel necklace, Spite muttering, "Show me the mango," over and over, and Beppo mock battling Goblin with his sword, it feels like the most normal thing in the world. This is what pirate life really looks like sometimes. Not sword fights or treasure maps. Just birds in funny clothes, teaching hardened sailors how to smile again. You wake to the sound of cursing, very creative, impressively long, and a loud flap-flap thud. That can only mean one thing. Someone's parrot has escaped again. You rub your eyes, peek out from your hammock, and see Black Henry sprinting down the deck, arms flailing wildly as Duchess. His haughty African gray makes an elegant arc through the sky and lands triumphantly on the ship's figurehead. She has a knack for dramatic exits. Despite all the affection, these parrots are not entirely tame. Not by a long shot. Which brings you to an underappreciated but very real part of pirate parrot life, the mayhem of escape attempts. See, parrots are clever, too clever, and the open sea is not a parrot's natural habitat, no matter how many walnuts you bribe them with. So they try to leave. Often. Some pirates clip their wings, but it's not as common as you'd expect. The old hands say it makes the birds lose their fire. And besides, Pirates don't exactly have avian veterinary skills. Instead, they try to train loyalty with treats and endless repetition. Still, parrots vanish. During storms. During raids. During routine mornings when someone forgets to latch a cage. One infamous account tells of a ship's lookout parroting a warning about Spanish sails approaching, only for the crew to realize it wasn't the lookout speaking at all, but the captain's escaped bird shouting old phrases from the mast, having taken up residence there like some melodramatic sea prophet. Historians still argue whether that story's true or apocryphal. Regardless, it's the kind of thing that feels true when you live among pirates. You, personally, become obsessed with one repeat offender, Maria. She's made it her life's mission to escape. Not permanently, oh no. She likes drama. You'll be cleaning your boots one moment and the next, she's darted through a porthole and taken up residence in the galley rafters, where she proceeds to knock over a ladle or insult someone's eyebrows. Eventually, you learn to bribe her back with raisins. Raisins, oddly, are her weakness. You never asked why. But these escapes raise a bigger question. What happened when parrots flew too far? Turns out, many simply joined the wildlife of nearby island. Seriously, if you've ever wondered how parrots came to populate certain tropical regions where they weren't originally native, pirate ships might have had something to do with it. Several colonial-era travel journals mention oddly vocal wild parrots in regions like the Lesser Antilles and coastal Honduras, birds that mimic snatches of Spanish, English, and French. Entire mini-populations may have sprung up from escaped pirate pet. You imagine a parrot utopia on some jungle island, feral, fiercely independent, holding secret parliament meetings in the treetops, possibly led by a particularly foul-mouthed ancestor of spite. But for every parrot that escapes, another comes back. Sometimes hours later, sometimes days. Like the story of Banjo, a green Amazon parrot who escaped during a hurricane, was presumed dead, and then casually returned 4 weeks later with a ring from someone's stolen necklace, as if nothing had happened. Went on holiday, the crew joked. But others weren't so lucky. Parrots would sometimes get picked off by hawks, lost in storms, or simply vanish. The grief was real. You recall a night when a tough, tattooed sailor sat silently by the railing, holding a little wooden perch in his lap. His bird, Pip, had gone overboard in rough weather. He didn't speak for a week. It's easy to forget how attached these pirates become to their birds. They may joke and grumble, but when one disappears, it leaves a hole. After all, parrots aren't just decorations, they're routines. Voices that fill the quiet. A bit of color on gray days. And besides, they're often the only creatures on board that don't judge. Or at least, not openly. You, meanwhile, come up with an idea. A tiny harness. Ridiculous? Absolutely. But with a bit of string, soft leather, and leftover buttons, you fashion a crude flight tether for Maria. It's not pretty. It's not even very functional. But it makes her look like she's about to skydive, and the image alone is worth the effort. She hates it, of course. Still, it slows her down enough that when she takes off during dinner, she only makes it to the second mast before giving up in a huff. Victory. Over time, a sort of truce forms. The parrots will try to escape. The crew will try to stop them. And somewhere in that back and forth, a routine emerges. Predictable unpredictability. Then there are the accidental captures. Wild parrots who choose to join the crew. It happens more than you'd think. A curious bird lands during calm seas, pecks at some fruit, and decides to stay. The crew names it something absurd, like Flapjack or Steve, and adds it to the flock. No one questions it. It's the pirate way. If something appears, feed it, name it, and swear it's always been there. You once watched two parrots argue over a single grape, then promptly snuggle up on the same perch 5 minutes later. It's hard not to anthropomorphize them. Are they drama queens? Absolutely. Are they family? Yes, weirdly. And when one of them disappears, whether by escape, fate, or boredom, it leaves a silence that echoes deeper than any cannon blast. You find yourself listening at night for a specific rustle, a distant squawk, that familiar muttering that sounds suspiciously like "pass the rum." Because deep down, every pirate knows, if the birds start vanishing, something's wrong. The days drift by, lazy and sun-blanched, until something strange starts happening. Your parrots stop talking. Not all at once. It begins with Duchess, who usually greets each sunrise with a string of judgmental squawks, declining to speak one morning. Then Maria, notorious for offering unsolicited commentary during dice games, goes uncharacteristically silent for 3 days. Even Spite, the ship's reigning gossip mimic, refuses to repeat the quartermaster's snoring sounds anymore. At first, you joke it off. Maybe the birds are finally bored of your jokes. Maybe they're staging a union strike. But the hush lingers, and suddenly the ship feels hollow. You never realized how much the parrots filled the space between chores. Their chatter was like a second wind in the sails. And now? Just creaks, waves, and the unsettling realization that pirates don't hum shanties as often as movies suggest. The crew notices too. They get superstitious. Bad omen, mutters one. Birds gone quiet means storms brewing, says another, though the skies remain infuriatingly blue. But parrots are complex animals. When stressed or displaced, they sometimes go mute, a fact confirmed by the ship's closest thing to an expert, Thomas the cook, who once ran away from a failed apprenticeship at a bird market in Port Royal. He claims parrots mirror crew moods, and the ship's been off lately. You suppose he has a point. Supplies have grown stale, tempers short, the wind listless, even the ocean seems tired. Still, the silence stings. So you try something desperate, a pirate talent show. Yes, it's every bit as cringy as it sounds. With a makeshift stage by the cargo hold, a trio of drummers beating on empty barrels, and a prize of 3 unweeviled biscuits, you invite the crew, and the birds, to perform. The results are mixed. One sailor recites dirty limericks. Another juggles cannonballs with alarming skill. Duchess watches unimpressed from her perch. Then it's Maria's turn. You step forward with her on your shoulder and whisper a familiar cue. Who's the queen of the poop deck? Nothing. But just as you start to bow in defeat, she fluffs her feathers, turns her head and mutters, "Not your mum." The crew explodes. Laughter roars like surf on coral. Someone nearly falls off the rigging. You swear Duchess rolled her eyes. From that night on, the birds slowly begin speaking again, snippets at first, then full phrases, even song. Spite belts out a mangled version of Spanish Ladies that ends with what sounds like "Bring me beans." No one corrects him, and with their return comes a flood of odd behavior. One parrot begins practicing knots, undoing laces and cords across the ship. Another becomes obsessed with shiny things, building a small, glittering nest in the quartermaster's drawer, complete with a stolen earring and a polished button that no one had seen for weeks. Historians still argue whether this resurgence of mimicry and trickery in shipboard parrots was linked to seasonal patterns, emotional resonance, or just sheer boredom. But you're living proof. When the parrots are happy, the ship runs better. And when the parrots are too happy, well, that's how you get the legendary vote. You see, one morning the captain holds a meeting about changing course. Should they chase rumors of a Dutch treasure galleon, or head toward an island with safer coves and fruit trees? The vote is split. Someone jokingly says, "Let the birds decide." Bad idea. Maria squawks, "Treasure, yes." Spite echoes, "Go left, go left." Duchess simply shrieks, and before anyone can object, half the crew has decided the parrots have spoken. You set course for the Dutch ship. It goes poorly, of course. You get caught in a doldrum and drift for 3 days. No treasure, just beans and regret. But from then on, the parrot's opinions are solicited during all manner of choices. Dinner plans, punishment votes, where to stash the rum. They become, in a very real sense, part of the crew's democratic process. An academic from King's College once wrote that pirate ships were floating republics with experimental voting systems. You'd argue they were just bird-influenced chaos factories. Still, it worked. Somehow. When the birds are active, the crew laughs more. The days go faster. Even disputes are diffused by a parrot echoing an insult 5 octaves higher, making the whole thing sound absurd. There's even a new parrot now, an emerald green thing with 1 foot, adopted after it crash-landed during a squall and immediately bit the captain's finger. They named it Mercy, which is wildly inaccurate. Mercy doesn't talk, but Mercy judges. You feel it in your soul. The parrots become so intertwined with ship life that new recruits are asked whether they have bird allergies during orientation. You also begin noticing new rituals forming. Each morning, one sailor now tips his hat to Duchess before breakfast. Another swears Maria brings luck and refuses to go on land without her. And every evening, Spite gets a single spoon of porridge, served in a pewter thimble like royalty. One sailor starts drawing little portraits of them in the margins of the ship's logbook. Another composes sea ballads, terrible ones, but heartfelt, about Polly the feathered first mate. Soon, the line between pet and crewmate blurs completely. Parrots aren't just mascots anymore. They're morale officers, tiny pirates with wings and egos. And despite all the squawking, the messes, the thefts, and the unspeakable horrors they commit with crackers, you wouldn't trade them for the world. Because on the days when the sea stretches endless and the air feels too thick to breathe, a feathered insult, a head tilt, or a nonsensical song about pickled onions is sometimes all it takes to remind you. You're not just floating on a wooden coffin across a liquid abyss. You're living, weirdly, hilariously, with a found family of chaos parrot. And they're watching you. Always. The parrots are officially in charge now. Well, not in any documented, legal sense. This is piracy, after all, not parliament, but in the strange social fabric of your ship, their influence is undeniable. Sailors alter their speech patterns to avoid teaching the birds new slurs. The cook tests his stew with a single spoonful offered to Mercy, waiting to see if she spits it back out. You've watched grown men get outvoted by a squawk. You've seen a parrot end a mutiny simply by screeching, "Not again, Jerry," in a perfect imitation of the captain's tone. And Jerry, poor, humiliated Jerry, sat back down. There are whispers that the birds are smarter than anyone gave them credit for, that they understand more than mimicry, that maybe they even conspire. You don't believe that. Mostly. Still, one night you wake up to the sound of soft cooing and find 4 parrots perched around a map, pecking at coordinates like they're planning a heist. It's probably a coincidence. Probably. But superstition runs thick in saltwater veins, and soon, other pirate crews begin taking notice. Word spreads at taverns and trading posts. That crew? The ones with the opinionated parrots? They haven't lost a ship in months. Some call you the Feathered Fleet. Others just say those weirdos with the loud birds. Either way, the legend grows, which means imitators start showing up. You dock in Tortuga, and suddenly 3 ships have parrots. One captain tries to glue tail feathers to a seagull. Another buys a drunk toucan who only knows one phrase: regret everything. You meet a woman who claims her macaw is a certified navigator. You ask how it signals direction. She says it sneezes due west. Historians still argue whether this sudden parrot craze was based on real seafaring advantage or just mass delusion, sort of like tulip mania, but louder and poopier. Regardless, the parrot boom, as it's now sometimes called in very niche academic circles, changes pirate culture. Markets inflate the price of exotic bird. Smugglers start offering custom parrots who allegedly quote Shakespeare or detect lies. Spoiler, they don't. One scam artist tries to pass off a rooster painted green. And amid all this, your own flock begins to evolve again. Mercy starts stealing compasses. Maria learns to fake sneezes. Duchess? She's begun saying, "I knew it," whenever someone stubs their toe, which is both eerie and wildly disrespectful. You realize something important. These birds aren't just pets, morale boosters, or court jesters. They're little mirrors. They reflect the chaos, creativity, and contradictions of pirate life. They absorb your habits, echo your arguments, mock your authority, and, occasionally, save your dignity by squawking something so absurd it derails a brawl before fists fly. One quiet morning, you sit by the bow with Spite on your shoulder, watching the waves churn beneath the rising sun. The sea is calm. The crew is sleeping. For once, no one's yelling. Spite leans close and mutters, "You're not alone." You blink. You didn't teach him that. No one did. At least, no one admits to it. But he says it again. And again. "You're not alone. You're not alone." You can't tell if it's meant as comfort or threat. The line blurs with parrots. And maybe that's the point. Because out here, where time warps and salt corrodes everything but memory, even nonsense becomes truth if repeated enough. And parrots? They repeat everything. You start writing down their phrases in the ship's log. Not official entries, just a running list of things overheard. The record ends up more accurate than the actual log. "Don't eat that." Left is cursed. Jerry's breath smells like regret. Rum isn't breakfast, but it's a start. You find solace in the absurdity. So does the crew. Parrots become therapy, confessionals, cosmic jesters in feathered robes. When the quartermaster loses a tooth, Duchess drops it in his lap the next morning. No one saw where she found it. He takes it as a sign and starts wearing it on a string around his neck. When a squall almost knocks the mainmast loose, Maria screams, "Hold fast," just in time for two sailors to brace the rope. Coincidence? Luck? Genius? Historians still argue whether these moments are evidence of uncanny avian intelligence, or if pirates, deeply sleep-deprived and constantly sunbaked, were simply prone to magical thinking. Either way, you lean in, because now the parrots feel necessary. You assign them watch rotations. You teach them call-and-response patterns, basic ones like "man overboard" or "sails on the horizon." Half of it devolves into gibberish, but the experiment earns a week of laughter. Someone paints tiny hats for them. Mercy refuses hers. Duchess demands two. One bird, a rescued cockatoo named Lemon, becomes obsessed with coins. Not just shiny ones, specific coins. He hoards old Spanish reals under a loose plank and pecks anyone who touches them. Eventually, the crew starts calling him First Treasurer. And then, in one remarkable twist, Lemon actually saves you. It happens during a chase. You're being pursued by a sloop that thinks you're carrying gold. You're not. You're carrying onions and shame. As the sloop closes in, your helmsman hesitates, unsure which reef passage is deeper. The charts are vague. You could run aground or escape. Lemon, squawking furiously, flies off your shoulder and pecks at the left compass dial repeatedly. Then he bolts to the rigging and screams, "Left! Left! Treasure left!" It's ridiculous, but you turn left, and you make it. The sloop doesn't. The crew erupts. Lemon is declared a hero. He is fed a single, ceremonial grape and given a scrap of gold cloth to wear as a cape. A fringe historian once published a thesis suggesting parrots were early AI in a sense, organic learning systems, evolving on pirate ships, responding to language, tone, patterns, and rewards. It was not well received. But you think about Lemon's left turn a lot. And the way Mercy somehow knows when someone's lying. And the time Spite mimicked your voice exactly to order rum delivered to his perch. You're not sure what you're dealing with anymore. But you know one thing for certain. These parrots aren't passengers. They're pirates. Feathered, foul-tempered, far too clever pirates. And your ship wouldn't last a week without them. You're woken by a peck on the ear. It's Duchess. She's holding a cherry pit in her beak, staring at you like you owe her a kingdom. This is your life now. You're not sure when the parrots transitioned from beloved mascots to informal crew officers, but the change is undeniable. They have routines, preferences, rivalries, and, most amusingly, they've developed an internal hierarchy that absolutely does not match your own. Spite, for example, sits at every captain's table meeting, not next to it, on it, usually in the middle of a map, blocking key trade routes with his talons. No one dares move him. Not since that one time he squawked mutiny in perfect timing with a dropped spoon. Now, during planning sessions, you light a candle, roll out the charts, and wait for Spite's judgmental stare to grant his approval. It's like trying to host a séance with a sarcastic ghost. And then there's Lemon, still guarding his hoard of reels. He now bites people based on whether he thinks they look poor. He's not always wrong. Of course, not all parrots take to piracy in the same way. Mercy, the quiet green one with the tragic backstory, you remember, has become the ship's unofficial nurse. She coos over bandages, warns of spoiled food, and glares at anyone who coughs without covering their mouth. Honestly, she's better than half the surgeons you've sailed with. And Maria? She's now multilingual. You didn't even mean to teach her French, but after 3 weeks docked in Saint-Domingue, she started shouting "Fermez la bouche" at anyone complaining about rations. She's also developed a strange fondness for lullabies. One night, while you're on watch, she softly hums the melody of a song you haven't heard since childhood. You don't cry, but you do sit very still. Historians still argue whether these parrots truly developed advanced cognition, or whether they simply forced humans to believe they had, which in practice is the same thing. Either way, the parrots have reshaped how you command the ship. There are now bird days, where a specific parrot sets the tone. If Duchess wakes up cranky, you call off any raids, because she will scream until the sails burst. If Lemon hops to the helm, you let him peck the wheel for luck. Does it work? Sometimes. Do the men believe it works? Always. You've even started assigning the parrots small tasks. Mercy helps the cook by squawking when spices go missing. Spite warns of approaching ships. Occasionally too early, occasionally imaginary, but better safe than stabbed. One particularly foggy morning, a parrot named Crumbs, who no one trained and frankly no one even remembers acquiring, starts screaming, "Not starboard! Not starboard!" over and over. The helmsman ignores him. You run aground. The ship survives, but you take the hint. Crumbs is now the ship's official compass. He is terrible at it. Still, tradition is tradition. And these birds are all about tradition. They mimic the bells, the calls, even the argument. A fight once broke out on deck, and 3 parrots recreated it word for word the next day, complete with sarcastic commentary. It became a comedy routine. Even the combatants laugh. It's not just noise. It's folklore, oral history, birdsong theater. Your crew starts calling it feathered gospel. You're not even mad. The parrots become memory keepers, mimicking accents of long-gone shipmates, replaying jokes from ports you barely remember. In a life where everything is salt-blasted and temporary, the birds offer continuity, repetition, echoes of identity, and one day a scholar visits. She's disguised as a merchant, but you know the type. glasses, notebooks, the way she watches everything without blinking. You offer her a cup of rum. She declines. Spite mimics your voice and says, "Suit yourself, nerd." You apologize. She laughs. And then she listens. For hours, she watches Maria recite sea shanties. She listens to Duchess reenact an entire storm sequence. She asks about Lemon's coin obsession. She tries to teach Mercy the phrase, post-colonial implications. Mercy replies, "No thank you." At the end of her visit, the scholar simply mutters, "You know, they've created culture." Then she walks off the ship and disappears. You don't know what that means exactly, but it feels important. Over time, new sailors join the crew, and their first training isn't sail handling or weaponry, it's parrot etiquette. Don't look Lemon in the eye. Never mimic Duchess. Always let Spite win at cards, even though he cheats by squawking. You enforce these rules with complete seriousness, because you know now, the parrots aren't part of the crew. They are the crew, and they're watching you. You find yourself muttering confessions near them, hoping they'll repeat them when you're too proud to admit it yourself. You test out ideas with them, see what they echo back. You even start speaking to them at night, when the stars come out and sleep won't. They never judge. Well, except Spite. One evening, after a long day, you sit on deck with Duchess on your knee. You ask her if this whole pirate life has been worth it, if the storms and losses and betrayals balance out against the brief, bright moments of freedom. She stares at you. Then she says, "You talk too much." Fair enough. You're beginning to suspect Duchess is the wisest soul on board. As days slide into weeks, and weeks into a hazy stretch of sea and sky, your ship begins to resemble less of a vessel of crime and more of a drifting aviary with a mild interest in treasure. The parrots are not just involved in pirate life anymore. They're steering it. Take the trade negotiations in Port Royal. You arrive to sell some less than legitimate spices, and maybe pawn a few silver buttons. But the moment Duchess lands on the table, the local fence immediately drops his asking price. "She's still alive," he gasps. Turns out Duchess is something of a legend. Her previous owner once double-crossed a Spanish admiral, escaped on foot, and left her behind. The bird's been whispering the admiral's deepest secrets ever since. You let the buyer believe you're now in possession of those secrets. You walk away richer than planned. You don't correct him. Later that week, during a stormy afternoon near Martinique, Maria begins screeching "low sails, high sails, wrong sails" over and over. You check the rigging. Everything looks fine. Then she adds, "wave like a building." You look out, squint through rain, and there it is. A rogue swell, nearly vertical. You cut the ropes just in time. You survive. No one questions the bird again. By now, every parrot has a legend. Lemon is said to curse anyone who tries to pet him without offering gold. Spite has been accused of controlling the wind with his mood. Mercy once predicted a chickenpox outbreak before symptoms appeared. Crumbs may or may not be a ghost. Historians still debate the line between superstition and avian influence on maritime behavior. But sailors don't care. When you're 3 weeks from shore, surrounded by salt and rot and creaking wood, you cling to whatever magic you can. And parrots? They're perfect vessels for magic. They're colorful, unpredictable, unervingly articulate, and, best of all, they remember everything. Everything. Which is becoming a slight problem. Because, you see, parrots don't forget lies. They don't forget mistakes. And when they're bored, they reenact them. That time you tried to impress a governor's niece by fencing with breadsticks? Duchess can still perform the entire dialogue, poorly. You never lived it down. That unfortunate incident with the honey barrel, the firefly jar, and a misinterpreted marriage proposal? Maria repeats it every full moon. Loudly. Even the crew has started to blush at their own pasts. You consider training the birds to forget. Turns out that's harder than treasure hunting without a map. You try distracting them with shiny objects. Lemon just adds them to his hoard and demands more. You consider bribery. Spite takes the coin and still tells the embarrassing story about your seasickness in a calm harbor. Eventually, you accept it. The parrots are your living archive. They carry your failures as well as your triumphs. And somehow, in the dim glow of ship lanterns, with the wood groaning beneath your boots and the stars hiding behind clouds, that becomes comforting. Because you remember less and less these days. The sea takes memories. Saltwater scrubs clean the sharp edges. Faces blur. Names slip through cracks. Even battles start to feel like stories you overheard, not ones you lived. But the parrots remember. And as long as they do, some part of you stays real. You once read. Okay, you overheard a scholar mutter it through a mug of rum, that oral history is the truest form of immortality. Well, congratulations. You're now immortal through parrots. One evening, anchored near a crescent island, you find Mercy curled up beside a seasick deckhand. She's softly repeating lullabies in 3 languages. You don't recognize the words, but the rhythm lulls even you toward sleep. You hear Lemon croaking the start of a sea shanty, and a dozen parrots join in, some off-key, others perfect. It's like a surreal, feathered choir from the underworld, but peaceful, weirdly peaceful. You lean against the mast, watching Spite adjust the position of a nearby lantern for optimal mood lighting. Or possibly heat. It's hard to tell anymore. Historians still argue whether pirate parrots ever truly integrated into ship command, or if humans simply adapted to accommodate the creatures they couldn't control. But you've stopped arguing. You've started listening. Because when a creature stares you in the eye and repeats your own voice back at you, your real voice, not the bluster, not the orders, but the soft whisper you once muttered into the rigging late at night, that's not mimicry. That's understanding. And on the sea, understanding is rarer than gold. You wake the next morning to find Maria perched at the helm. She says nothing, just taps the compass with her beak. And you know, it's time to change course. The parrots have outlasted the rum, the fresh fruit, even the sails. It's been 3 months since your last proper port. The crew is quiet, weathered, and a little odd around the eyes. But the birds? Still thriving. Duchess is now wearing a 3rd earring. You don't know where she got it. The ship creaks more than usual, and the horizon hasn't offered much in the way of landmarks. Navigation charts have been loosely interpreted. The stars are still there, but no one seems to trust them anymore. You trust the parrot. One morning, Mercy lands on your shoulder and says, "Northwest, coconut smell, no taxes." You nod. Adjust the wheel. The crew doesn't even ask. They follow the parrot. A month ago, that would have been concerning. Now it's a kind of freedom. When every rational tool falls apart, compasses, maps, calendars, maybe intuition and feathered weirdos are your best bet. Lemon has taken up residence in the crow's nest, muttering poetry. Not good poetry, but poetry nonetheless. Occasionally, he shouts things like "Banana Rebellion" or "Stars in my soup." You start to wonder if he's predicting your dreams. He might be. You have a strange one about a parrot congress that passes a motion to abolish coconut. The next day, the galley cook drops a whole crate of them overboard by accident. You stare at Lemon. He stares back. Parrots aside, your body begins to slow. You move like you're wading through syrup. Muscles ache in unfamiliar ways. Not from labor, from stillness. Sleep comes in strange doses. Time no longer ticks. It sloshes. The birds seem unaffected. In fact, they're thriving. Spite now has a hobby, reorganizing the captain's maps according to color, not geography. You hate how good it looks. One evening, a storm creeps up, low clouds, sky like lead, wind with a whistle. The crew prepares, but the parrots have already taken cover. Maria vanishes into the hold. Duchess squeezes beneath the helm. And then in nothing. The clouds pass without spilling. The ocean stays glassy. You realize something eerie. They knew. Historians still argue whether pirate parrots could sense changes in air pressure, electromagnetic fields, or pure sailor intuition. Some say they just copy human panic. Others believe they genuinely saw things you couldn't. But you no longer doubt their instincts. You've started to rely on them more than charts, more than gut. Maybe even more than crew. You try not to say that part out loud. One night, you hear murmuring near the forecastle. You sneak closer. It's not men. It's parrots, dozens of them, whispering in overlapping rhythms, mimicking the voices of long-dead captains, old lovers, angry merchants. Some are singing softly, others cooing in strange syncopation. It's haunting, and somehow deeply peaceful. You sit down quietly, let the sound wash over you. Stories from decades ago, filtered through feathers and instinct and repetition. They've become the ship's memory now. Not you. Not the logs or the scratched wood on the galley door. Just the parrot. It hits you like a soft wave. This is the true legacy of pirate life. Not gold, not maps, not revenge tales, but memory, kept alive in the only creatures that never forget, never judge, never embellish, well, maybe a little. Duchess once added the phrase, and then he wept like a sea turtle, to an otherwise factual account of your broken sandal. But still, close enough, and now, nearing land, maybe, it doesn't matter anymore. The crew is quiet. The ship is drifting slower. You stand at the bow, watching Spite stare at the clouds. His feathers ruffle once. You know what that means. Almost home, wherever that is. And as the parrots begin to softly chatter, reenacting moments you forgot you'd lived, you close your eyes. The world rocks gently beneath your boot, and you begin to fade, not into sleep exactly, but into something more permanent. Emerging, you and the birds and the wood and the sea and all the ridiculous, messy, glorious pirate days you've dragged behind you. You don't need to remember anymore. They will. And now, as the ocean stills and the creaking fades, let yourself drift a little. The stars above don't twinkle sharply tonight. They hang like soft lanterns in a fog, blurred and welcoming. The parrots are quiet. Even Duchess, proud and flashy, is tucked beneath a fold of sailcloth, one eye half shut, dreaming of sunlit jungles and salty crackers. The ship breathes with the waves, rising and falling in a slow, familiar rhythm, your heartbeat now matching it without you even realizing. There's nothing sharp left, no harsh wind, no brash laughter, just the gentle hush of rope against wood, the distant splash of something small in the water, the occasional sigh from a dreaming sailor. And above it all, that steady rustling of feathers, like pages turning in a forgotten book. You're safe here. Whatever storms came before, whatever maps were wrong or captains got loud or parrots mocked your fashion choices, it's all past. Let the stories wrap around you like a threadbare blanket still warm from the sun. Let your thoughts scatter like spilled beads across the deck. There's nowhere to be, no orders to shout, no gold to count, only sleep. So settle in. Let the wind hum softly against your window, or the fan at your bedside. Let your mind empty, your limbs loosen, and your breath deepen. You made it. You outlasted the sea. And now, the parrots will keep your memory alive.